The elementary school had sat quiet for decades, its windows boarded, its halls surrendered to dust and silence. But when the department brought in a retired K-9 for a community event, no one expected him to freeze in front of faded painting in the main hallway and tear into it with primal urgency. Behind the canvas wasn't just brick. It was a hidden opening, a space someone didn't want found, and what waited inside would reopen a wound the town had buried deep. If you're drawn to true mystery, stay close. This one cuts deep. The rain had come heavy the night before, leaving behind that clean, sharp smell of wet dirt and cracked pavement. Sheriff Tom Callahan stood on the cracked sidewalk outside Briar Glen Elementary, squinting up at the building. His breath ghosted in the chill. He hated being here. Everyone did. It had been closed since 1997, after a sinkhole swallowed the southern wing. The district didn't have the money to fix it. They just closed the place up and moved the kids across town. Now it was mostly a ghost. Occasionally, someone tagged the back wall with graffiti, or kids dared each other to sneak in and film TikToks. But otherwise, the school had been left to rot. Until now. Sheriff. Came a voice behind him. Callahan turned and saw Officer Rena Morales walking up with Kane, the retired K-9, padding beside her. Kane was slow now, grizzled, one eye clouded, joint stiff, but his nose was still sharp. The dog had once tracked a missing boy through 40 acres of dense pine. Found him clinging to a drainage pipe with a broken leg and no shoes. "Appreciate you doing this," Tom said. "I know it's odd. Odd's your middle name," Rena muttered. She brushed back a wet strand of hair and looked at the school. "Why'd you ask for Kane? Building's been sealed for years." Tom hesitated. There's been movement inside. Motion sensors went off 3 nights in a row. No footprints outside. And he trailed off. And the old janitor, Bill Jenkins, was found dead in his truck yesterday, parked in front of this place. Key still in ignition. Rena frowned. "Jenkins? He's been MIA for years." "Yeah, I thought he moved out west, but he had a set of school keys. The old kind, skeleton style." Rena looked at Kane. Think the old man was trying to get back in? Or trying to keep something in? Tom said quietly. They stepped inside through the warped side door. The metal frame moaned as it opened. The air inside was sour with mold and old textbooks. Paint curled from the walls like dry bark. Kane walked stiffly but alert, his ears high. The hallways were still lined with fading construction paper projects. Thanksgiving turkeys, multiplication tables, a Save the Rainforest poster bleached pale by time. At the far end of the corridor hung a large canvas mural, about 6 feet across. It showed smiling children around a tree, arms linked, a dove in the sky, a big yellow sun. Kane stopped in front of it. Not just stopped, froze. "Something wrong, buddy?" Rena said softly. Kane began to tremble. Then, without warning, he lunged at the painting and clawed at it with sudden violence. His paws shredded canvas, exposing crumbling drywall. Behind that, plaster. And under that, something darker. Rena grabbed his harness, pulling him back. But Tom was already walking toward the wall, his flashlight clicking on. The surface beneath the painting wasn't drywall. It was wooden slats nailed in a crude, square shape, maybe 4 feet wide and 5 feet tall. The wood was old and rotted, but you could see where it had been nailed over a recessed cavity in the brickwork. Tom ran a hand over the edges. "This isn't original construction." "No chance," Rena said. The slats came loose with a few hard yanks. The smell hit instantly. Not fresh decay. Older, faint, but still wrong. Behind the planks was a narrow cavity, a hollow space between the inner and outer walls. The beam from Tom's flashlight swept across the small, square recess and stopped. A child's shoe, blue canvas, Velcro strap, faded cartoon character on the side. It sat alone on the dirt-packed floor of the cavity, half buried. Tom's throat tightened. This doesn't make sense." Rena didn't speak. Kane let out a low, sorrowful whine. Tom crouched and carefully reached in, brushing away the dirt. His hand froze. There was more. Fabric. A corner of something striped. He pulled gently. A child's backpack. Mickey Mouse. Ripped at the seams. And then a glint of metal. Rena leaned closer. Is that? Tom nodded. It's a badge. He turned it over. Faded gold. The name barely visible through grime. M. Ryland. Rena stepped back like she'd been slapped. No, that can't be. Tom looked at her, then back at the badge. It's her. Officer Megan Ryland. She'd vanished in 1996 during an investigation into a missing student. She was never found. No trace. No body. No answers. The case had frozen the whole town. And it had started here, at this school. Tom swallowed the knot rising in his chest. We need to clear this place. Top to bottom. Now. The sun had begun to break through the clouds by the time the evidence team arrived. Yellow tape went up. Reporters circled the outer fences like vultures. Tom sat on the back bumper of his cruiser, staring at the dirt under his boots. The badge was in an evidence bag. The backpack, too. The shoe. Forensics had confirmed the space wasn't just hollow. It was a crawl tunnel. Just 20 inches wide, running between several inner walls, then dead-ending. Someone had built it intentionally. Someone had used it. I don't get it, Rena said beside him. Why seal it up? Why the painting? Tom shook his head. That mural was added in 1997, after the sinkhole, the same year the school shut down. She looked over at him. You think Ryland was onto something? I think she found something and paid for it. They were quiet a moment. Then Rena added, You remember that kid? The one who went missing back then? Dylan Kearns? Tom nodded slowly. 6 years old. Vanished during a school day. Never found. Same year Ryland vanished. They say he was last seen walking to the nurse's office. Tom looked up at the school again, eyes narrowing. We need to find that nurse's room. Inside the school again, the corridor seemed different now. Heavier. Tom and Rena moved past the admin office, toward the rear wing. Kane stayed close, his body low to the ground, nose twitching. The old nurse's office door was locked. Tom jimmied it open with a crowbar. The room smelled like antiseptic and rot. The metal cot still sat on the window, rust spreading up its legs. A glass front cabinet of expired pills stood against the far wall. Everything was gray. Kane sniffed along the baseboards. He stopped near the cot and whined. Found something? Rena asked. Tom knelt. There's a panel here. He pried it open. Another cavity, smaller than the last, but deeper. Inside were rows of folders. Files, each labeled with a student name. He pulled one out. Kearns, Dylan. Inside was a behavior report. Notes from a counselor. A scribbled warning. Observed during lunch. Repeated symptoms. Possible test subject. Tom felt the hair rise on the back of his neck. What the hell is this? Rena leaned over, flipping through another file. It's like medical reports, but not the usual kind. These are experiments. She held up a note, torn and stained, written in careful block letters. Do not sedate too heavily. Memory bleeding possible. Observe for 72 hours post-protocol. OM whispered. They were using kids. Rena's hands were shaking. You think the nurse was behind it? I think someone was. And Ryland got too close. Kane let out a short bark. His head snapped toward the far corner of the room. There, just behind a leaning bookshelf, was another sealed panel. Rena moved it aside. They both stared. This time, behind the panel wasn't just a cavity. It was a stairwell, a narrow, spiraling staircase leading down into dark. Tom's voice was low. This wasn't on the blueprints. No, Rena said, but it's real. He looked at her. You sure you want to do this? I was 10 when Dylan disappeared, she said. He was in my class. Tom nodded once. He clicked on his flashlight. Kane stepped forward, nose low, and together they went into the dark. The stairs groaned with each step, old wood fibers crackling like dry bones. The light from Tom's flashlight trembled across the narrow walls as he descended, Rena just behind him, one hand gripping her sidearm. Kane moved ahead slowly, nose low, ears pinned. After 14 steps, the wood turned to concrete. The air changed. Cold, metallic. Underground. Tom swept the light across the walls. They were unpainted cinder block, damp in spots, with dark streaks running from ceiling to floor. Electrical conduits snaked along the edges, decades old. The corridor stretched forward about 30 feet, then turned sharply left. At the corner, someone had scratched something into the concrete. Rena leaned in close. They hear us when we sleep. Below it, a handprint. Small, child-size. She turned to Tom, her voice a low rasp. This wasn't just some sick experiment. This was torture. They kept moving. The hallway opened into a larger room, a windowless square with a cracked linoleum floor. On the far side stood a row of rusted filing cabinets, all padlocked. A metal chair lay tipped over near the center. The overhead light fixture hung by its wires, long dead. Rena's flashlight caught something in the corner. She moved closer. A mattress, thin, stained, covered in what looked like crayon scribbles across the wall. Stars, names, one word repeated over and over. Listen. She turned away. Her stomach turned over hard. Tom stood at the cabinets, trying the locks. None of these looked recent, but someone tried to break into this one. He pointed to the third cabinet. Its lock was bent, rusted and twisted at the hinge. Let me guess, Rena said, stepping over. No prints. None. He yanked the lock. It snapped, metal flaking. Inside were dozens of manila envelopes. No names, just codes. S04, M19, J07. Rena opened one. Photos, black and white. Children strapped to hospital beds. Eyes open, some blurred, some staring straight into the lens. She dropped the envelope like it burned her. These aren't school records. No, Tom was pale. They're medical files. And someone was documenting everything. Kane let out a low growl. His nose pointed toward the far wall, where something stuck out, an old breaker panel, covered in grime. Tom pulled it open. A switch, marked only with red paint. Emergency shutdown. Rena shook her head. This was more than just a crawl space. This was a program. Tom flipped the switch. Somewhere below them, something clicked, and somewhere beneath the floor, something hissed like a long, dying breath. The hiss faded. Tom and Rena waited, tense. Then, faintly, from somewhere beyond the back wall, came the sound of water trickling. Kane pawed at the concrete baseboard. There's something else, Tom whispered. A second level. They searched along the wall until Rena found it. Another panel, nearly invisible in the dim light, outlined with faint scoring marks. Tom wedged his crowbar in and pried it open. Behind it, a narrow crawl space, a descending concrete shaft. A ladder bolted into the wall. Tom dropped a rock inside. Counted 3 seconds before it hit. Rena exhaled. We're way under city level now. Tom slung the flashlight on his shoulder strap and started down the ladder. The walls were damp, like the soil around them was breathing. They landed in a low tunnel with old light fixtures along the ceiling. One flickered. It gave just enough glow to reveal the corridor stretching forward, maybe 20 yards, ending in a rusted metal door. Kane led the way, his movement slower, more careful now. When Tom pushed the door open, it creaked with a long metallic groan. They stepped into a circular chamber. At first glance, it looked like a maintenance facility. Pipes lining the walls, a large drainage grate in the center, and 2 more doors leading out, one on each side. But what caught Rena's, was the wall opposite them. A mural, painted in crayon and watercolors, like a child had done it, or many children. A tree, a house, a line of stick figures holding hands. And in the middle, written in blocky blue letters, "We never got to go home." Under it, 15 names. Dylan's was one of them. Tom's chest tightened. He stepped back. Rena knelt beside the mural. These are kids that vanished. I count 15 names, Tom said quietly. 13 missing children. 2 presumed drowned in the creek. But if that's true, they never went home because they never left here. Rena turned to one of the side doors. This one was bolted from the outside. Tom unlatched it. Inside was a dormitory. 6 bunk beds, all rusted and lined with deteriorated mattresses. Each had a footlocker. Some were open. Inside, children's drawings, pages torn from books, a single shoe. On the wall near the entrance, tally marks. Dozens. Hundreds. Rena turned away and wiped her face. Then she saw something. On the wall beside the doorway, carved words. She tried to save us. He stopped her. And below it, in smeared red ink, Ryland. Tom swallowed hard. She made it down here. Yeah, Rena said quietly, and she died trying to get them out. Kane barked once. He was standing at the second door, paw raised, tail rigid. Tom opened it slowly. This room was colder. A concrete floor lined with surgical drains, medical beds with restraints, shelves of equipment, glass jars, and along the far wall, photographs, tacked into place with thumbtacks, labeled with names, children in various states of sedation. But in the center of the wall, a single photo had been burned around the edges. It showed a man in a white coat leaning over a small girl with wires attached to her temples. The girl was awake, crying. Tom stepped closer. Rena lifted the burned edges carefully. The man's name tag read, Dr. Samuel Hargrove. Tom's voice caught. He used to teach here. Biology teacher, Rena said, remembering, moved away right before the sinkhole, or disappeared into the hole he made, Tom said. Kane growled, low and unbroken. Behind them, the air shifted. A cold draft snaked through the chamber. From the shadows near the mural, a panel in the wall creaked open. Tom raised his flashlight, and a figure stepped out. He was old, gray hair swept back, a cane in one hand, but his eyes sharp, too sharp. Leave, the man said. You shouldn't be here. Tom stepped forward, gun low. You Hargrove? The man said nothing. Rena stepped beside Tom. You ran experiments on children. I saved them, Hargrove said calmly. We tried to prepare them for a world that would destroy them. You tortured them, she snapped. Hargrove looked at the mural. They were chosen. Quiet ones. Forgotten ones. Their parents didn't even ask the right questions. Tom stepped closer. You killed an officer, Megan Ryland. Hargrove looked at him for a long time. She wouldn't stop. She found the stairwell. She found them. You murdered her, Rena said. No, he said softly. I asked her to leave. She didn't. Kane snarled and stepped forward. Hargrove raised his cane. You won't understand. No one did. The town needed answers. But no one was willing to pay the price for truth. Tom's finger hovered over the trigger. You're under arrest. Hargrove laughed. For what? The children you couldn't find? The bodies you never buried. Tom moved. Down. Now. But Hargrove didn't resist. He stepped forward slowly and whispered, She's still here, no? Megan. They never found her body because she never left. Rena's voice cracked. Where? But Hargrove was already collapsing to floor, clutching his chest. Kane lunged forward, sniffed his face. Tom knelt. He was gone. They called it in. FBI. State crime scene, local press. But the real story stayed quiet. Hargrove's lab was sealed. The underground chamber, cemented. But Tom couldn't forget that last thing Hargrove said. That Megan Ryland never left. 2 nights later, Tom returned alone. He walked the stairwell, flashlight in hand, heart pounding, down to the mural, down to the dormitory. He stood there a long time. Then he heard it, behind the wall. A faint knock. Once. Twice. Then silence. The knock echoed again, low and deliberate, as if someone was calling from behind the bricks themselves. Sheriff Tom Callahan's breath caught in his throat. The musty air of the underground chamber pressed in close, and the faint, sickly scent of mildew seemed sharper somehow. He pressed his palm against the cold, rough surface of the wall, where the sound came from. It was solid, but not unyielding. Behind him, Kane growled quietly, the dog's instincts razor-sharp after years on the force. Rena's footsteps were steady as she returned, her face pale, eyes heavy with exhaustion, and questions no one wanted to answer. "We have to get them out," she said without preamble. Tom nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. The children who had vanished. The ones hidden beneath the school, forgotten by the world above. They were still here, trapped in some cruel limbo. And Megan Ryland, the officer who had sacrificed everything, was more than a memory. She was a ghost who wouldn't rest until the truth came free. They returned to the main hallway of the school, the oppressive weight of the underground chamber hanging over them like a shroud. The forensic teams had finished gathering evidence, but had only scratched the surface of what lay hidden. Tom knew the town wasn't ready for the truth, yet here he stood, with no choice but to confront it. The question was simple but terrifying. How had no one known? How had these children disappeared into the earth beneath the school, without a single witness, without a trace? Rena pulled a crumpled notebook from her jacket pocket. "I found this in the nurse's files." Megan's notes. Tom took it, opening the fragile pages. The handwriting was rushed, sometimes illegible, but the words told a story no one had dared tell out loud. Project Sanctuary, for children at risk, medical monitoring, emotional support. Officially, a pilot program to help children with learning disabilities and behavioral issues. Unofficially, a secret experiment to alter memories and behavior. I don't know who authorized it or why, but I do know that children who refused treatment disappeared. Tom's fingers trembled as he read the next line. "Dylan Kearns told me the truth. The halls hide the broken. I hear them. I have to find them." Rena's voice was barely a whisper. She believed she could save them, until Hargrove stopped her. Tom closed the notebook. "We have to find a way to open the wall." The next morning, the town woke to the news. The school had concealed a secret chamber where children were held, experimented on, and lost to time. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some called it a conspiracy, others a tragedy. The local officials tried to downplay it, but Tom and Rena had no intention of letting the story die. They returned to the site with a demolition crew, carefully dismantling the wall where Kane had first ripped the painting. As the final brick was pried loose, a small hatch revealed itself, a narrow crawl space, just as Kane had discovered months before. Tom shone his flashlight inside. There, huddled and gaunt, were 13 children, their eyes wide with disbelief, some reaching out in trembling hands. The rescue was frantic and chaotic. Paramedics rushed to assess the children, who were malnourished, confused, and frightened. Medical teams worked to calm them, to explain that the nightmare was over. Among the survivors was a frail, pale girl with haunted eyes, Dylan's sister, Julia Kearns, who had disappeared long ago after searching for her brother. She clutched Tom's hand as if it were the only lifeline left. "Thank you," she whispered, voice trembling. But the story didn't end with the rescue. The town was fractured, families reunited with their lost children, but many were changed, scarred by what they had endured. Megan Ryland's name became a symbol of courage and sacrifice, a reminder that some truths come at a terrible cost. In the weeks that followed, Tom found himself drawn back to the school, to the mural painted in crayons and hope. One evening, as dusk settled over Briar Glen, he stood alone in the empty hallway. Kane lay at his feet, old but faithful. Tom traced his fingers over the chipped paint. The voices had faded now, but their echoes lingered, soft whispers of lives forgotten and justice delayed. He realized that sometimes the deepest wounds are not those you see, but those buried in silence. And in that silence, a quiet promise remained, that the loss would never be forgotten again. If you appreciate stories that remind us of hidden truths and human resilience, your support means a great deal. Thank you for reading.